All right. So welcome to the Kailua Study Group, Kailua Online Study Group with the say tape 116A from Joel, and so welcome to that. And this is also the 19th day of Resurrection in Progress. So we have been meeting every day. So this day 19, and we look more fresh and light than ever. So that's so great to see that. So much joy is stirred up. So much light is present. It's unbelievable. So thank you for participating in that and giving everything to it. So today, the activity of Christ in us. I think that's the title. Maybe I got it wrong, but I'll come back to that later. The talk that we're using today in this meeting, and we also use it in the meditation. So I selected a part of it out of the talk that was very helpful to use in the meditation contemplation. And yeah, so that's working out great. It's lovely to see that. So all this is the availability, so to speak. It's an availability of so much, so many resources and all that. There's so much material, but what are you actually going to do with it? Is then, do you need all of it? Well, no. Your presence here right now is everything that matters. And so you can allow this time that we come together for a huge, say, opening of your consciousness, of your receptivity to the light and love that is present. So that is your opportunity. It's like it doesn't need to happen another time. You don't have to wait until you studied enough to get something or to go somewhere, something like that. No, it's like it still comes down to here's the present moment, here we meet, here we are in the recognition of that nothing else exists but this moment that is free of any worldly belief, that is free of any limitation that you could possibly imagine. All of this, you leave all that behind. In the meditation we practice this, but also it's like there's not going to be a better moment to receive this, what is given in this moment, because there literally is nothing else. And that's good to know. It's like, it is not about reading as many books as you can or listening to as many tapes as you can, or none of that. So in fact, what is being asked of you is just this in return for everything. And that is just stepping back, be still, quiet, receive, open up, let go. These are the activities. Release. These are the activities that are given to you to do, to be undone, in fact, to step back and to let the light do the work in you, for you, with you, and through you. Joel says it in his talk too, like from now on you don't live your own life. And that's not a threat, and that's not okay, now I have a different personality too. It's not a multi-personality thing or anything. No, from now on you can allow to leave your nets, in that sense, to come into light recognition that is occurring in this moment by you stepping back out of your ideas about yourself and about what the world is and about what God is. All of that you don't need. All these ideas you hold about everything, you don't need any longer in order to experience, to come into communion with God, with your source. So the relationship is one of omnipresence, is one of wholeness, is happening right now. You were never separate from it. So it's time to wake up out of your self-imposed nightmare to come to a different experience altogether that has nothing to do with anything you thought before, you thought that happened before, or what you're afraid of that the future will bring, or any of these ideas. You leave all that behind. So here we are, entering into that moment together with a certainty of purpose. I mean, come on. A certainty of purpose. Look at what is given in this present moment. Like everything is given in this present moment. Why not catch a glimpse of that? Why not open your consciousness to the outer edges of it and see that there are no limitations on that whatsoever? So that is the invitation. And so the part that I use for that is coming from this tape. As I said, I made a sheet of it that I'm going to share with you. And yes, we're gonna see it from there. So in the meantime, we will have quiet moments and 4 or 5 minutes each, something like that. Most of the time it's like that. And I repeat this probably 4 or 5 times. I don't know exactly. Then we listen to some music too. And then I start the introduction to the tape. And then about 10 to the whole hour, we have a little break. And then we continue with listening to Joel. All right, that's the program, and here starts the meditation. God is the source of my being. I declare, this is your declaration, I declare and realize that Spirit is my true identity, and that I am no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. None of the laws of man are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of Spirit, which I am and which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being. God is the activity and the law of my being, and I consciously accept that right now. I'll repeat it once more. This is your declaration of independence, in fact. God is the source of my being. I declare and realize that Spirit is my true identity, and that I'm no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. None of the laws of men are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of Spirit, which I am and which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being. God is the activity and the law of my being, and I consciously accept that. God is the source of my being. I declare and realize that Spirit is my true identity, and that I'm no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. None of the laws of men are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of Spirit, which I am and which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being, and God is the activity and the law of my being. And I consciously accept that. God is the source of my being. I declare and realize that Spirit is my true identity, and that I am no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. None of the laws of men are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of Spirit, which I am, and which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being. God is the activity and the law of my being, and I consciously accept that. God is the source of my being. I declare that and realize that Spirit is my true identity, and that I'm no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. None of the laws of men are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of Spirit, which I am and which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being. God is the activity and the law of my being, and I consciously accept that. Okay, thank you so much. I love the song, that's why I played it too. It's like the lilies of the field. So great, beautiful. So what a provision. That just keeps coming up to me, like what an incredible provision. I can't believe it. So beautiful, so great. So happy to share that and to and say feel the activity of truth in our consciousness. Just like the title of the tape is like the activity of truth in our consciousness. That's where it happens. That is the only thing that there really is. And so Joel, in this talk, he has like a large number of subjects. Like I wouldn't know where to start to listen to the talk, but there's a lot in there. And so today, say before this meeting, before that we listen to the tape, I want to share a couple of things, like one about a very specific part that Joel is giving to us in this as an insight. Like, yeah, you could spend an hour, say, sharing about that, because it's so beautiful. So it starts like this. In fact, it is like the idea of I'm looking for a house, I'm looking for better health, I'm looking for different relationships, I look for this and I look for that. This is our state as a human being. Like we're looking for that, we're looking for that. Like I said the other day, it's like objective reality. You're looking for something, for safety, for making sure that everything is going to work out, like this. And that seems to be the thing that occupies your mind the whole time. you come to the end of that in your spiritual awakening. You start to develop new ways of looking at what is actually life, what is this dream. And Joel brings in the idea, this idea too, like, because it seems to be like the trap of mind that you fall easily back into when something doesn't work out the way that you think it should work out. And what I mean with that is you experience limitation, lack, limitation, sickness, financial trouble, relationship issues, who knows what, death in the family, or all of these things that are coming your way in your human existence. So all these things are there, and suddenly you make some of that real for yourself. You're right in the middle of it. So it's like in your idea of limitation, you made one thing real, and suddenly you find yourself in the middle of it, and not knowing how to get out, because it seems to be impossible in the way that you see it and the way that you can understand this. And so that's very common, and you say bump up against that until you see that there's no solution to that on the level that you perceive the problem. That would be another talk of Joel, but like there's no solution where you actually meet the problem. So how hard you try to find. And are you doing that? Yeah, you are trying hard to do that many times, trying to look for a solution for your situation, trying everything you can for your situation, while you don't question the reality of that situation. That's the tragic suffering of a human mind. In fact, you look for salvation, you look for liberation, you look for sufficiency, the very basic things that you're looking for. In fact, you ask too little, even that too. It's like there's so much more. But anyway, you experience your limitation in a place where never the solution will be. And this seems to be the reason for your resistance to receive help from God, from outside of this idea about yourself. Like you prove to yourself exactly in that spot that you have no idea how God's ways work. You have no idea if there's help at all, if any of this is true. Because when you're in darkness, so to speak, you cannot see the light. It's simple as that. You cannot see it. And it's so it doesn't help to pray for that to be resolved, or to pray for your liberation, to do all these things that we have done for centuries, literally going to church to pray to change situations without questioning the reality of the situation. It's like, it is not a fact that you are perceiving. It is not a fact. It is literally an appearance that comes to you, and you make it real, but it doesn't mean it's real. That's the difference. And this is an endless game you play with yourself, like not without end, of course, but you you get it. You get it when you get it. So you can't see that you're in the way of your own salvation. Like literally you are in the way. You need to get out of the way to see that, here it is. Oh my God, I cannot believe it. The last thing I expected to happen. Like suddenly I'm free of confirming my perception as the reality of me, thinking that that's an objective reality, that's literally true for me. I finally give up that idea and recognize the singularity of reality. Like my mind as the mind of God is whole. Like I and my Father are one. There is no difference. There is no lack. There is no, like, I'm a man born of spirit. I allowed that change to occur. That's why I'm on a spiritual path. I'm born of the spirit. I allow that process to take place in all situations. That will give me, say, access to that what always is. See, and this needs to be repeated apparently over and over and over until it starts to dawn on your mind. Oh, oh my God, look at that. And there it goes. Whatever limitation you say observed before and took as a fact, as an objective, real thing, suddenly flashes into light, literally. It's like it's a quantum leap suddenly that takes place in your consciousness. Suddenly you shift out of your reality that you held on to as the limitation of yourself. Suddenly you shift out of that. And you've no idea how that happened. And it was the only thing that you needed to get out of your situation. So see, this is then the healing that can take place right now, because it's really realizing that there's no such thing as an objective world, and that there's only one singular reality, and you are an essential part in that. Like, it's completely connected to you in all situations, with any exception, so that's the given. So I want to share the screen with you with the transcript that I sent out to you. And if you didn't receive it, just let me know and I'll send it to you. I can still not see it. Okay, so here Joel uses the idea of health spiritually discerned. Health spiritually discerned. So let me see. My peace I give unto thee. I start here on the top. My peace give I unto thee, not as the world giveth. All right, there comes an activity of truth in our consciousness. What does the Master mean by my peace? Well, you don't know, and I don't know what the answer is for you. I only know what the answer has been in my experience. But I do know that that someday or other you must experience my peace, Christ's peace, God's peace. I know that someday you must experience Christ's supply, spiritual supply, as separate and apart from, or something different than the world's concepts of supply. I know this too, that we cannot go on forever enjoying good health and the world's concept of good health. Only one day we must make a transition into the Christ idea, the spiritual idea of health. Okay, so then we continue. What is health spiritually discerned? What is the spiritual realization of health? See, and then the question is this. What happens in our lives and bodies when we are no longer physically healthy, but spiritually whole? So I'll stop right here. So this is exactly what I mean. It's like it is not about your ideas. Like, it's not about your ideas about health, wealth, and all this stuff. And you know this too. Like, it's not about that any longer. So what is spiritually discerned health, wealth, supply, you name it? When you discover the wholeness of your being, like that is in fact an invitation to a revelation. It is not anything else. So nobody can answer that for you. But the great thing is that this is a decision of you. It is a decision. just like we declared ourselves in the meditation, like I declare, it comes down to that. Like I need to declare that to myself. And not that the words will do that, but it will come to you what it means that your mind is whole in the sense like there's no place where you're not connected to everything. It's like every aspect of creation, the wholeness of God, the allness of God. There's no place where you are not connected. Only in your perception of the world as you see it, or perception of the mesmerism of your situation that you think you are in. So now, what I mean with the decision then is this, is like you decide that you're going to declare yourself as, say, a whole aspect of the allness of God. Does that make you a whole part of it? It helps you to realize that in your consciousness that this activity can take place now, and that you are, say, not accepting any other definition of yourself. And that's really something that you have to do. That's the only thing that you have to do. So that means just like the examples are from the meditations, like, no, you're not going to say make any of this real that is occurring in your life. The body does this, the body does that. My financial situation is like this, my financial situation is like that. It's like none of that has anything to do with the allness of you, with the wholeness of your mind. It has nothing to do with that. And it is that you want to experience that instead of anything else. So the vigilance that comes in with that, it's like you have to be vigilant for the truth. And bringing that back into your consciousness, instead of bringing back old memories in situations that you were suffering, in situations that you were, say, in lack of supply in any kind of way, or a lack of health, or lack of this or that. You know, it's like those days are like we're getting to the end of time with that. Like those days are almost over. They can be over right now if you decide to do so. It's really like that. It's like when you decide that this is over for you, you actually put yourself right in front of the gate to heaven, because you will know what my peace means when that is occurring. You will suddenly start to feel that as an activity in your consciousness. My peace. I cannot believe how simple that is. I cannot believe it's only happening right now. Why was I worried about tomorrow? Why was I still bringing back things from my past into this present moment, just to entertain that idea longer, to prolong my suffering? I'm not going to do that anymore. So that's in fact what Joel teaches here. And like I said, he has so many subjects in this talk that I really don't know where to start. But I will start, say, after 20 minutes or so. I think there's really like a lot of a lot of meat in the middle. So I want to give that to you. And you can listen, of course, to the tape whenever you like. But this is the part that we're listening to together. All right, I think I should, see. So I'm going to play say a little musical intermezzo before we start listening to the tape of Joel, The Activity of Truth in My Consciousness. Thank you so much, and see you after the break.
Laws of time and space, laws of infection and contagion, laws of food and climate, and others. Now, by a specific act of consciousness, I declare and realize that spirit is my true identity, and that I have now come out and become separate and am no longer of the world, even though in it, not of it, and therefore not subject to the world's laws, material or mental. No longer subject to theological beliefs about heaven and hell, about sin and punishment, or any other form of belief in suffering from not having communion, or suffering from not having baptism, or being in hell because of not confessing. None of these human beliefs, theological or medical, superstitious or natural, none of these laws are binding upon the child of God, the offspring of spirit, which I am, which I recognize myself to be. God is the source of my being. God is the activity and the law of my being, and I consciously accept that. I just don't sit back in a corner somewhere and say, oh God, but actually, consciously, I accept within myself that as spiritual being, I am subject to spiritual law. I'm not subject to law, I'm subject to grace. I'm no longer under the law of man, under the law of matter, no longer under the law of theology, no longer under the law of materia medica. I am under grace. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. I consciously realize that. I consciously declare that. I consciously accept that within myself. In the same way, business is subject to laws of economy and laws of politics, sometimes called political economy. But you see, business isn't. Business is an activity of God. God is the source of business. God is the activity of business, and the activity of God is omnipresent, and it is spiritual. It is not material, it is spiritual. But I am operating under a physical law of business, a political law, an economic law, an industrial law, until such time as I consciously bring myself out from under and realize why my business isn't material. My business was conceived in the mind of God, nurtured in the mind of God, maintained and sustained in the mind of God. Therefore, it is not subject to outside conditions or the will and whim of persons. Business is not subject to persons. Persons may be subject to business because they're subject to the law of God. And no person can violate the law of God, but the law of God can take care of persons who get in its way. Now, while this is true, it is not true so far as you and I are concerned, except in proportion as we accept this truth as an activity in our consciousness. In other words, the light may be shining for everybody in the world, but we are left in darkness, except as we open our eyes and our ears. Everybody in this world may be blessed, except us. Their being blessed will not be a benefit to us, except insofar as we accept our blessing, and that must be done consciously, through an activity of truth in our consciousness. There is the formula, activity of truth in our consciousness. There are no set formulas for the acceptance of it, such as made-up statements of truth or prayers or treatments. But there is something that everyone must consciously experience, and that is an activity of truth in consciousness on every subject that concerns their lives. For instance, we speak of safety and we speak of security. Those are two of the important topics of the world. Every human being is at this moment in danger to a lack of peace and insecurity, a lack of safety and insecurity because of things outside, that is, outside of ourselves. Watch this point. Is there anything out here that can act upon me? Or is the law of God, the grace of God within me, acting out from the center of my being onto my body and my affairs? Now, as human beings, everything out here acts upon us favorably or unfavorably. But under the law of God, since the kingdom of God is within me, all good unfolds from within my being, and there is no evil. Ah, yes, but none of this happens until I consciously make the transition from being a human being, subject to the laws of matter and of mind, to the realization that I am of the household of God, and that all the power of good unfolds from within my own being. In the same way, in human experience, there are two powers, good and evil, the power of God and the power of Satan, the power of good and the power of evil. Now, in spiritual truth, there is but one power. There is no such thing as a power of evil to protect oneself from, whether it's a material evil or a mental evil. In God's kingdom, there are no such thing as powers. There is only the divine state of being which eternally is. But that is meaningless, except as we consciously accept it within ourselves as an activity of consciousness. When we make the transition of dying daily and are reborn of the Spirit, it is only because we commit suicide, as it were. We definitely, by an act of consciousness, destroy our humanhood and its good and evil in order to exchange it for our Christhood, which knows neither good nor evil, but only a continuous and divine state of being, harmonious being, spiritual being. Now, this, you see, is not taking thought for our life, what we shall eat or what we shall drink or wherewithal we shall be clothed. This is making a conscious transition through accepting the activity of truth in our consciousness. There's nothing of anxiety about this. There's nothing of doubt. There's nothing of concern. There's nothing of fear. There's nothing of worrying of whether we'll ever eat another meal or pay another month's rent. None of that enters into this. This is making a conscious transition from humanhood to Christhood. This is making a conscious transition from being the man of earth to being the man of spirit, the man of God, the man of Christ. Now, it is for this reason that practitioners can be of help to us in overcoming our discords and inharmonies, but they can never be of permanent help. That is, they can never take us into the kingdom of God, since that has to be done by an act of truth within our own consciousness. No teacher can die for you. You have to die to material selfhood, to material law, to material government, and you have to be reborn through an activity of consciousness within yourself to the realization of spirit as that which governs you, maintains you, and sustains you. This work that we do together lifts you in consciousness to where you can apprehend this truth and accept it. But the apprehension and the acceptance must be on your part. In other words, what we know or think with the human mind is not the ultimate spiritual demonstration. But the truth we entertain in consciousness lifts us to a place in spirit where the Spirit can take over and govern us harmoniously. Going to be horsewhips out there pretty soon. That is why you have noticed in the writings that I've said that this is not a lazy man's work. This is no lazy way or easy way of getting into heaven. This is a difficult way, for the simple reason that up to the place where the spiritual contact is made and experienced, up to that place where we can say, oh, now I no longer live my own life. I don't even have to think right thoughts. I don't even have to know the truth. It functions. Up to that moment, it is absolutely necessary that we consciously and specifically know the truth. But now, one of the words that takes up far too much room in our literature is the word supply. And the reason is that we, in turning to spirit, are looking for a physical manifestation. In other words, probably this is why the book Leave Your Nets is so little understood. We go to God, but we think in terms of more money. When the Master said, leave your nets, he wasn't expecting them to catch more fish. Certainly not after he had told them to get rid of their nets. But we turn to the Spirit and look for it to appear as more dollars. As a matter of fact, it does. But it is the looking in that direction that keeps us in bondage to this, the violation of spiritual law. Now, when we leave our nets, it doesn't mean that we're leaving any of the human forms of good that exist, but it means that we are leaving all thought of them as to how they shall appear, or when, or why, or by what means, or even whether or not they shall. Who says that they must? In the kingdom of God, when we realize it, there are far greater riches than those that we on earth can dream about. So that something must take place in our consciousness that concerns that command, leave your nets. How are we to leave our nets? In what way can we leave our nets? What happens if we do leave our nets? That is something that each one takes up as an activity of truth in their own consciousness until the answer is given to them by God. Not necessarily the answer that God gave me, but the answer that God has for you. Now, my peace give I unto thee, not as the world giveth. All right? There comes an activity of truth in our consciousness. What does the Master mean by my peace? Well, you don't know, and I don't know what the answer is for you. I only know what the answer has been in my experience. But I do know this, that someday or other you must experience my peace, God's peace, the Christ peace. I know that someday you must experience Christ's supply, spiritual supply, as separate and apart or something different than the world's concepts of supply. I know this too, that we cannot go on forever enjoying good health, the world's concept of good health. One day we must make a transition into the Christ idea, the spiritual idea of health. What is health, spiritually discerned? What is the spiritual realization of health? What happens in our lives and bodies when we are no longer physically healthy, but spiritually whole? Do you see that? That has to take place as an activity of transition within your own consciousness. You must day by day grow out of the habit of believing in good health. That was one of the very powerful statements in one of Mrs. Eddy's writings. I'm not surprised if it's Science and Health, which she says, we must overcome the insanity of health. The insanity of health. Yes. The insane belief that a heart that beats so much and a digestive system that does such things and a blood system that does this, that constitutes health. How can it constitute health when we all have it and the next day are dead? Or next month or next year or whatever? No. That isn't health. That is a physical sense of health, always subject to change, always subject to destruction. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, changing always, and if for no other reason than just the movement of the calendar. If nothing else will do it to us, that will. Do you see that? Now, if we are to die daily, we must die to the belief of health, just as we must die to the belief of disease. Because in our spiritual demonstration, there is no disease and there is no health. Why is this true? Because we have nothing of our own. We can't have a disease and we can't have a health, because if we did, we'd have something of our own, since God has neither health nor disease. God is a spirit, and all that we can possibly have is the Spirit of God. Do you follow that? Don't forget, this is just a tiny capsule full of atomic bombs. We can only have health as long as we believe we have something of our own, a life of our own, a body of our own, a selfhood of our own, that we're even under laws of our own. But you see, we will overcome health the minute we realize there is no selfhood apart from God. We will even overcome wealth, and we will demonstrate an infinity of abundance, not ours, God's abundance. Do you see this point? The only thing that you can possess is what God possesses, because we can possess nothing of ourselves. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Therefore, as long as we insist on having health of our own, wealth of our own, it will be up and down, rich and poor, good and bad, live and dead. It is only when we make that transition to the realization that God's selfhood is the only selfhood, and it is neither rich nor poor, neither sick nor well, neither young nor old, and neither alive nor dead. It's just a state of immortality, of eternal being, unchanging and yet infinite in its forms and appearances. Just as a garden represents nature in expression, the one nature, and yet it expresses itself as everything from coconut trees to orchids. Now, if we are to accept this truth, where do we accept it? In consciousness, within ourselves. Could we accept it in any other way? No. We have rejected it that way all our lives. We have kept it out of consciousness, not willingly, ignorantly. But now, if it is to appear as an activity within us, it must appear as an activity of our consciousness, so that it may even be necessary for us sometime to sit down and be quiet and realize, right here and now, I accept the grace of God. I accept the grace of God as the allness and onlyness and perfection of my being, of my body, of my business. I accept God's grace as companionship, as home, as opportunity, as success. I accept consciously the grace of God as a law unto my being, as the only law operating in my mind, in my consciousness, in my heart, in my life, in my soul, in my being, in my body, in all that concerns me. I consciously accept God as the one influence in my life. I accept the activity of the Christ, of spirit, of soul. I accept the love of God as the only love in my experience. I consciously reject any love which is not of God. I consciously reject every love which is not of God, every law which is not of God, every belief which is not of God, anything and everything of a material and a mental nature which is not of God. And in doing this, I open myself to receive divine grace in consciousness, to accept the government of God in place of the government of matter and material beliefs and mental beliefs, mortal beliefs and theories and superstitions. Why should I be under the subject of where the stars are in the sky? Why should I be under the superstitions of church? Why should I be under the superstitions of astrology or of theology? Why should I even be under the superstitions of natural law? Why not, in my inner consciousness, realize God's government is supreme and it operates through grace? And I hear and I now accept the grace of God. Now, having done this once, thoroughly and completely, we have at least made room within ourselves to remind ourselves every time that there is the appearance of something contrary to that, we again remind ourselves that it's the grace of God that governs me, not material law, not mental law. And we remind ourselves that spiritual power emanates from within my own being and flows out from me to my affairs, and therefore nothing in the outer realm can act upon me, whether it's the stars in the sky or the bombs in the sky. Nothing from without can enter that defileth or maketh a life, but all good flows out from me, through me, to me, and to all who are within range of my consciousness. That is an activity of truth in consciousness that we must practice. And we must practice it continuously until one beautiful day comes along when all of a sudden something happens within, and then when it does, you say, oh, just think, that was all true. Heretofore I've declared it, but now I know it. There's a difference between declaring it and knowing it. Once it's known, you no more have to declare it, then you would walk around declaring your name, or declaring that 2 times 2 are 4, or declaring that your money's in your right-hand pocket. You don't have to declare anything once you know it. And I mean by that, know it with this inner conviction that is called spiritual discernment. And that comes in that second of transition when the Christ takes over, announces itself, reveals itself as being on the field and in possession of all your being and body and business. And so you see, it is not a contradiction to say that all truth must be consciously entertained in thought, and on the other hand to say, take no thought what you shall eat or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed. You yourselves must watch that and must come to the right conclusion on it, because sooner or later you will have to take hold of that statement of the Master's. Just as we do not live by bread alone, so you will have to take thought of leave your nets. Leave your dependence on everything which heretofore has been your mainstay. You see, here were 12 fishermen, and they only lived by one thing. They didn't care so much about bread. Fish, that was the thing. Fish. Without fish, we don't live. Our families are not supported. Even the taxes are not paid. Fish, fish, everything depends on fish. But, the Master says, leave your nets. Oh, it would have been so much easier if he'd have just said leave bread or butter. If he'd just said leave bank accounts or something like that, that's easy. But fish, that's really putting them up against a brick wall. So it is with us. The day does come when you realize no dependency on those things that have been mainstays, those things that have been as important to us as fish were to the fishermen. And then we began to say, what, Lord, do you mean, leave your nets? What do you mean by leave your nets? How are we to leave those things on which we have depended? In what way the answer will come to you, I don't know. But one thing is certain, that included in the answer will be that there is an infinite invisible. That everything in the visible realm comes forth from the invisible. Things that are made from things which do not appear. Everything that is seen is an emanation of something which is in and of the invisible. Nothing exists here in the visible realm except that first came forth from nothing, the invisible. And so the answer will always include the realization that there is an infinite invisible. While we're doing this, let us consciously, remember this word consciously, let us consciously remove ourselves from physical and mental laws and place ourselves under grace. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Thy grace is the only sufficiency. Thy grace is the only presence and power in my experience. Thy grace governs, maintains, feeds, and sustains. Thy grace is my bread, my wine, my water. Thy grace is my fish. Thy grace is my meat.